Hello and welcome to Emma's ESL English. So this month we have been looking at real British English. First, we covered the RP accent or the King's English and why that's not actually a good representation of British English. Then we covered the regional terms of endearment for strangers that are used right across the UK. And today, I want to talk about some of the dialect words that you might hear in the UK. So some of these dialect words are literally from another language, like Welsh or Scottish or Irish, but some of them have come from English being isolated in a particular area. Of course, there's also the influence of all of the people who moved there. So for my area, this town was one of the biggest ports for over 200 years in the UK. And we had a huge number of immigrants coming to this town. They came from Ireland and they came here in their thousands. So that Irish is very, very strong in this town. There are lots of Irish family names in this town, but there was also big influence of the Irish language on the dialect words in this town at those times as well. A lot of these dialect words are descriptions of things. So it kind of makes sense that we've kept them because we would be like pointing and saying that's the thing. So we're just using different words to describe. It's common to hear dialect words used for weather and geography, things like mountains. The UK coastline is 12,429 kilometers long, and everywhere in the UK is within at least a few hours' drive of it. Around the country, fog rolling in from the sea is something we can quite easily experience. So it's maybe not surprising that there are specific dialect words for this rolling fog that comes in, particularly from the sea. Of course, a lot of the country just calls it fog or mist. I did do some research on this and I found a Reddit thing, and there was like probably 50% of the people were like, duh, it's fog, or duh, it's mist. So definitely a lot of the country is still using fog and mist. But I think one of the things we notice is a lot of times it's the place that gets the most has the strongest hold of the dialect words. In Scotland, it's called sea whore, but actually that whore has like 4 different pronunciations. Even though it's spelt H-A-A-R, it's said har, whore, hole, and there's another one as well. So the spelling is the same, but the actual pronunciation of the word varies quite dramatically across Scotland. I mentioned last week that Yorkshire is a very large county in the UK, and it actually has a huge coastline going from south of Hull right the way up the coast until you get to Northumberland. In Yorkshire, you will hear 2 different words for sea mist, and one of those travels further to Northumberland. So in Yorkshire, it's very common to hear people call the sea fog sea fret, F-R-E-T, and further north it becomes sea roke, R-O-K-E. Another common one when we're talking about descriptions is mountains. Of course, there are lots of different mountains around the UK. And if you look on a map and you look at the mountain ranges, you will see they have different names. The Pennines runs down the middle of the country. The Yorkshire Dales is off onto one side of the country. And we have the Cumbrian Fells, Cumbria or the Lake District, on the left-hand side of the country. So where I live, we call mountains fells. In Scotland, they're called Ben, B-E-N. So you can see that attached to the mountain name, which is actually very similar to the way it works in Korea and China. So it becomes something like Ben Nevis or Ben Lomond. So it's basically Mountain Lomond or Mountain Nevis is how that works. And in Wales, it works in a very similar way. In Wales, the mountain name is Bryn, B-R-Y-N. In fact, in Wales, there are several different words in use. one of the key things to bear in mind in the UK is we have such a variety of geography here. One word just does not cut it. There are other ones such as beacon that you can also find in the UK. The one that is quite a weird one is bread roll. Traditionally, we have sandwiches in the UK, right? Traditionally, this would have been in a bread roll. You would make lots of little rolls of bread in the morning and they would be cut and your bait would be put inside them. Oh, I've just found another one. Bread rolls, because they were such a common lunchtime food for everybody, especially if you're working in the fields, you can easily take them with you. They have different names. In the East Midlands, they are called cobs. In Scotland and Wales, they're called baps. In Manchester and Liverpool, they're called barm. In Coventry, batched, as well as a bun or a roll. The terms bun and roll, generally roll definitely means bread. Bun can mean more of a cake, like a muffin, American style muffin. That can be a bun in the UK, depending on where you are. So that one gets a little confusing, but definitely roll is common across the UK. These are not interchangeable around the country. These words are very, very specific to the local area where you are. I did say about bait earlier. I can't tell you the variety of different words of this because this is a particularly local word to my area. But bait usually means what you're using to go fishing with, the food that you're putting on your hook to catch the fish. But in my area, it also means your lunch. So your bait box is your lunch box in my area. That is not across the UK. Okay, and finally into the weather. Scotland has two weather words that I really, really love. I think we've covered them before on this channel, but just in case we haven't. They are driech and hoolie. Driech is perfect for Scotland. In Scotland, it's very, very common to be very dark and rainy. My mum always says that the first year we moved to Scotland, it rained every day from August to March. And my final year in Scotland, there were only 5 sunny days for the whole of summer. So especially if you're on the west coast of Scotland, it is going to be raining and dark a lot. So when you look outside and you see that real dark, heavy sky and the rain pouring down and the wind blowing, because the wind is always blowing at the same time, you could say, oh, what a delicious day it is today. It sounds right for the day, you know. The at the end there is the CH that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago in words like loch, which is the Scottish word for lake. So that same sound appears quite common in Scottish words. The second one is hoolie. Hoolie is a word for wind in Scotland. If the wind is really blowing, so we're thinking like a gale force wind, which is pretty common in Scotland, then somebody might say, oh, it's blowing a hoolie out there. So it's blowing a hoolie means it's blowing a big wind out there. So these are both Scottish dialect words for weather. So there you go. Between these 3 weeks, I think you probably have quite a lot of real British English. I hope you can see now that British English is far more complex than the Queen's RP accent. While the RP accent does sound very nice, it does, you have to do an awful lot with your mouth to make it work. In the UK, I would say that people who speak with an RP accent, the expectation is that they probably come from the upper class. Not always. It may just be the area that they come from, but there is that kind of feeling there with it. So if they're talking all together, that's one thing. But if one of them were to walk into a shop in Glasgow, I don't think they'd be called hen. That's for sure. So really, there are lots of different accents right across the UK that you can come and enjoy. And the reality is sometimes you will understand them and sometimes you won't. If you know you're moving to a particular area in the UK, then I would suggest you look up some movies and TV shows that were filmed in that area so you can start to get your ears used to that local accent and dialect. Otherwise, it's going to be a little tricky for you to really catch everything that everybody's saying. As always, remember that a lot of native English speakers don't know about how to learn a language well, so we don't know how to help you when you're struggling to understand us. So it is always okay for you to ask someone to please slow down, because you're actually helping them learn how to help you. You will probably need to tell them more than once, though. We have a tendency to just get louder, which obviously is not helpful. If you're just coming to visit, that's probably not so helpful, but listening to this podcast and other British English podcasts, very, very good idea. The same applies if you're going to other countries. America is much easier because most of us have watched a lot of American TV. But going to New Zealand, they both have their own dialect words and accents that are very strong in Australia and New Zealand. Australia in particular has a tendency to cut words in half, to shorten them, give everything a nickname, which doesn't make any sense to us British people at all. So in Australia, people go from afternoon to avo and from jealous to jelly. We do not understand these words. What do they do? I don't know. It's baffling. So if you're planning to move and live in New Zealand or Australia, and even if you're just going for a holiday, definitely invest in a book that's been written by an Australian ESL teacher, or start listening to podcasts and things so that you can start getting your ears used to that different sounding accent. South Africa also has a lot of dialect words and quite a lot of different accents as well, because of the influence of Afrikaans and other South African languages on English. But if you're just traveling, there's less need for it. And it's more, practicing your English generally. Sorry, we're not helpful. We're not really helpful. Sorry. Anyway, so next week we'll be looking at some weird idioms that we have in the UK. Just, more stuff to confuse you all. If you find this useful, please leave a like or subscribe, or drop me a comment underneath. If you've had any weird experiences or heard any weird words when you were living and working in the UK, please drop them below. Let me know, and I'll be happy to explain them, or perhaps we can just laugh about them. All right, see you next time. Bye.